Hi everybody. I've had some people ask me if I could do a part 2 to the teenage acne video that I did last week, and could I talk more about foods and foods that I recommend for teens that are suffering with different forms of acne, a lot being the food related acne. So I wanted to go over these foods with you. The most common foods that I take teens off are dairy. Now, the dairy being that if someone has in this area here, which in face mapping is the small intestine, if they have those tiny little bumps underneath the skin, those white bumps, not necessarily pustules or papules, but they have these white bumps under the skin, lots of congestion in this area. So this is very typically a dairy related type of acne. So the dairy being cheese, I also include soy milk into that one, which is not necessarily termed dairy, but so it's cheese, soy milk, cow milk, ice cream, chocolate, anything else dairy, but the biggest one in the dairy area is cheese, and yellow cheese is the worse than the lighter white cheese. So that is very typically one that I do take teens off is dairy. I also take them off citrus. Now, citrus, sometimes when there's irritation on the skin just looks irritated, and it's not necessarily a bunch of congestion, but just irritated. It could be anything. It could be just ruddy and irritated, but it could be pustules and nodules. And the citrus being oranges, grapefruit, pineapple juice. Having a little lemon water, drinking lemon in your water is, it turns alkaline in the body. So I'm not too concerned about that one. But the grapefruit, the orange juice, especially orange juice, because a lot of teens drink orange juice, and pineapple juice. So that is the citrus ones that I take people off. Then in the other areas, what I do is I take them off peanuts. Peanuts is so bad. Even when I eat peanuts, I myself break out, and I don't get pimples, So if I eat peanuts, I'm not kidding. The next day, I will have a pimple on my face. I've even gone to the extent of speaking to my chemist about peanuts and why peanut oil is not used in a lot of cosmetics, and it's not used at all in any cosmetics, is its composition doesn't work for the skin. So, even though they say, well, peanuts is, it's high in protein and all these things when eaten internally, there are a lot of people obviously that are allergic to it. And it contains a lot of allergens, very seriously allergic to it. It's just not a great nut to eat if you have a problem acnetic skin. And in an article that I wrote some time back, there was a nutritionist who had also written saying that, peanuts wasn't great, for digestion. It wasn't great for a lot of people. And I added in that article that peanuts was something that I just don't believe that anybody with acne should eat peanuts at all. And even as I said, I don't even get pimples, but eating peanuts for me, I will get pimples. So I had written an article in a magazine a couple of years ago, and I actually got an email from the Peanut Corporation asking, why would I be saying such a thing, and why am I saying that peanuts is not great for people to be eating. And then, the person had also made a comment that saying, I had never heard of this before. And at that point, I just thought, well, I'm not even going to answer back here because, of course, there's a lot of people we know that can't eat peanuts, which is why it's not, you're not even allowed to have them in a lot of schools. So basically, it's not that it is a bad food necessarily. Yes, it contains proteins and, it is good for some people, but for a lot of people, including myself, it's not great. So I'm sorry, we have an airplane flying over. But anyway, so peanuts is one that I really, that's a big one I take people off straight away. Any oily nut, if you're eating macadamia nuts, is also another one that's really oily. So for some people, we just don't break down that type of oil in our body well. The gallbladder, plays a huge role in the fats and breaking down things within our body, as well as many other other organs. Everything works so beautifully together. It's such an amazing thing, our bodies, isn't it? But there's some of the other foods. So we've got our dairy, we've got our citrus, we've got our peanuts. Sometimes when people have a lot of facial hair, and people that tend to have a lot of acne often are darker complexion, meaning darker hair, slightly more olive skin. Often if someone has a lot of fine facial hair on their face, sometimes I do ask them about, the quantities of meat that they're eating, because sometimes, now we have a helicopter. So sorry. Because I'm up here in the mountains of Bel Air where I work, and life is so busy and crazy all the time. I'm always trying to grab some time. Oh yes, a helicopter. Trying to grab some time to do my videos lately. So anyway, when someone has a lot of fine facial hair, I tell them, and it's not, when I say fine, it's darker, but it is a fine to the touch, but a darker in color facial hair. Then I do tell people to really cut back on the red meat consumption, because people I find that tend to have that type of acne, that hormonal painful nodule acne, that are darker complexion, darker hair, darker facial hair, I find that they tend to often be bigger meat eaters. So I'm often saying, to really cut that area back. A lot of the time, and I've talked about this before, if someone has KP, the little bumps on the backs of their arms, Keratosis Pilaris, and they might have a little bit on their face, they might get those little tiny bumps, and it starts here in this part here of the face, these tiny little bumps. They're not pustules. If you squeeze them, a tiny little bit of stuff will come out, but they're not like a regular pustule with red inflammation around it. They're not a painful nodule. They're just these tiny, tiny little bumps that you can feel, and it looks a little red here. Then this is all Keratosis pilaris, and it's, the same most people get on the backs of their arms. Now that is a sensitivity to sugar. So if someone does have little bumps on the backs of their arms, I do tell them, to really cut back significantly on sugar, because the less sugar they eat, and the processed sugar is the worst, the less sugar they eat, the better their bumps will be. Because if you go to a dermatologist and they say, oh yes, you've got Keratosis pilaris on the backs of your arms, they won't, they'll just tell you to use a scrub, use a glycolic, something that has a little bit of an alpha hydroxy acid in it, and just scrub your arms, and they'll tell you that's the best thing to do. But in actual fact, if you cut back internally, if you cut back on your sugar, you're going to find your KP will get significantly better. And what that also means is that you've got a sensitivity to sugar. So maybe someone in your family has got diabetes, maybe someone's borderline hypoglycemic. So it does mean you're sensitive to it. It doesn't mean that you're going to have diabetes when you're older. It just means that you have a sensitivity to it, and it's better that you don't eat in abundance, because health-wise it could be a problem later in your life. So understanding that our body is the largest organ of elimination, it's really important to, number one, understand that, and number two, it takes years for things to come out on our skin often. When you've got something going on the inside, it is the largest organ of elimination. It is going to come out in some way, shape, or form later in life. And it's just something to really observe and to understand that there's reasons why things happen, and there's reasons why there's certain parts of the face that age faster than the others. You know, you might see somebody that's really aging around their eye area. They've got tons of wrinkles around their eyes, but the rest of the skin looks really good. And you know, there's reasons why that happens, because of course our stomach area is around the eye area, and usually people that have a lot of wrinkles around their eyes and the rest of their face is really good, that's all their stomach. It means their stomach is a sensitive area. And you know, the stomach is I mean, everybody, we come into this world, we are born with weakened organs that we carry on from our parents, our grandparents, and everybody's got something that that we need to strengthen, you know, and be aware of as we age. And so it's important to understand that. And you know, and there's things you can do to help that. So you know, as I said, if someone's aging quickly around the eye area, that's their stomach region, they might have food allergies. So if someone's aging around the eye area and that, you know, they've got a lot of lines there and they have less lines, you know, on other areas of their face, it's their stomach area. And that just means that the stomach is, it's not as strong, you know, and it maybe isn't breaking down foods as well. So you can take probiotics, you can take digestive enzymes, you can, you know, eat smaller portions and be conscious of what you eat. Don't eat so many foods together at one time, like in a salad. Instead of having like 10 different types of vegetables in that salad, maybe just have, you know, 3 or 4. And that way, because each food in your body has its own enzyme chain. And if you put a lot of foods together to have in one meal, that's a lot of work that your body has to do and all your digestive enzymes to break it down. So, you know, as we get older, we want to eat more simple. We want to eat, you know, it's not about quantity, but just it's about simplifying, you know, and just having, you know, 3 or 4 vegetables instead of 8 or 10 vegetables on a plate. And that's what helps, you know, it helps with digestion. So there's that. There's maybe, you know, some people take psyllium husk powder in the morning to help them digest foods. Probiotics are very, you know, a lot of people take those. A lot of people, as I said, take, you know, they eat papayas or they take digestive enzymes. And so just be conscious of all of these things, you know, to eat slower, be aware of what you're eating, enjoy, you know, have a space where you can enjoy your foods when you're eating, and you know, eat slower, chew your food really well, especially if you're eating meats, and just be conscious of these things. And this is what helps with something like the eye area, which is a stomach area. And of course, massaging in that eye cream, like I always talk about, get that movement going there. You know, when you're using an eye cream or an eye gel is really important. So, you know, these things help. Here, down here is your large intestine. So often things start in the small intestine and then, or start in the stomach into the small intestine. But if you're talking about something like Candida albicans, that's yeast in the body, that always does start in this area, the small intestine, and it will eventually spread down into the large intestine and down into the neck area if you don't nip it, if you don't get that under control. And some of the foods that are really important, we have another truck or something there in the background. So some of the foods that are really important for Candida to stay away from, and I say with Candida, if you want to really get rid of it quickly, you have to go off foods 100% for a length of time, and that could be 2 to 3 months. So, and I mean 100%. So, and those foods to stay off if you have Candida albicans, which often I can see on the face because of the tiny little bumps that you can feel it. It feels like, you know, touching a towel, like it feels a little bumpy. And it's similar to gluten intolerance, but Candida albicans, it starts, as I said, the small intestine. If you are someone who has Candida, you are usually somebody who feels really tired a lot, very lethargic, hard to get up in the morning. Your memory is not as good as it used to be. It doesn't make you sick, but these are the things that just sort of makes you tired and sluggish. So Candida foods are all vinegar, all fermented foods, and that means topically as well. You know, no apple cider vinegar, no vinegars, no fermented, no baker's yeast. Anything that rises, like breads and cakes, anything that rises has baker's yeast. Beer has baker's yeast in it. Cheese, all your mold foods, mushrooms and cheeses, all mushrooms. Melons, to stay away from melons. which is your cantaloupes, your watermelon, you know, your rock, we call them rock melons back home, but morning dew. And so we've got vinegar, we've got the mushrooms, the cheese, the mole foods, and of course, you know, your wine is fermented, so no wine, and baker's yeast, breads, anything that rises, beer, melons, and I think that's it. Yes. And then if you do have KP as well on the back of your arm, you should stay off sugar. So if you look up what the foods that they tell you to stay off if you have Candida albicans, sugar is one of them. But I do not tell people to go off sugar unless they have little bumps on the backs of their arms. Okay, so Candida I've dealt with a lot in the past with my clients. It really affects the body in a lot of ways, and it affects the quality of your life. So there's a few things that have added to my lengthy part 2 of my teens. It's also been, we've talked about Candida, we've talked about the eye area aging quickly, and foods to stay off, and how to eat. So I hope this has been helpful, and I will be back to see you all again for another video next week. Bye-bye.